All righty. So first, we want to make sure that everybody knows that they can be members of NHRC and support the work that we do. For instance, these kinds of webinars that we're doing. But the big news is that we now can take payment from you through credit card. So the link is here, and Christy will put the link for that into the chat as well. We know a lot of you were asking for that, and we have come up with a way for you all to do that. So hopefully that makes things easier for folks. Bruce will talk a little bit more about membership later on. It is Native American Heritage Month, and we really want to celebrate that this month. Long before we lived on it, the land we're on was occupied, managed, and maintained by Indigenous peoples and tribes. And it's important to learn about the history of the land that we're on. Not only does it honor the people it was taken from, it helps us to honor and steward the land better. To learn about tribal boundaries in your area, the link on the page here brings you to an interactive map of tribal boundaries around the world, and you can enter your own address. So for instance, I entered mine, and I am living on land that was maintained and occupied by Mohicans. So anyway, it's just really interesting. The one thing I will say, there's a disclaimer that pops up when you click in, and so I encourage you to read that disclaimer. I am now going to hand it over to Bruce so that he can go over our agenda for today. Bruce.
Thank you so much, Ellie, and welcome everybody. And I believe I'm on the Lenni Lenape land, but I have to check the link to make sure. But I'm definitely in the Lenni Lenape area. So we're going to do a quick. We'll do our usual NHRC updates. I've got updates. Christy, Eric, and Ellie all will have a couple quick things. But the real goal of this meeting is to talk about Native American housing, and really we're interested in you knowing what, as housing counselors, how this fits into your work, whether you're working in an area where there's reservations and high concentration, or if tribal peoples are dispersed in your population, in your where you are. And that there's valuable things to know about all of it. And I think this will be helpful to all of us. So really glad that the people from OISTA and their affiliated organizations are joining us on these things that hopefully will be quite helpful. And this will be recorded. So if there are people in your organization that you'd like to hear it, you can go to our YouTube channel and catch it. There'll be plenty of time for questions and answers, and we will do a plug on joining NHRC. We're coming to the year end, so a few groups haven't renewed their membership dues, so we will hope you do that before the end of the year. And always love to get new members coming in. It is what gives us the ability to lobby and the flexibility that we can do projects that don't have a particular funding stream. So really valuable. You're kind of all in this together, advocating for the good work you do in policy circles. With that, let's dive in. And I think I'm going to start. So before the elections, there was a White House meeting. We're not part of it, but our allies were part of it. The National Housing Conference, the MBA, the Realtors, a number of other organizations were there, NAFA, the National Fair Housing Alliance. And the administration wanted to know what the advocates and housing industry people thought about what the administration can do to deal with housing issues after the elections. The follow-up meeting was held yesterday. And between that time, the National Housing Conference put together a list of opportunities or projects, one-pagers on initiatives. We submitted 7 out of the 45 that went in. So HUD approved housing counseling assistance at $70 million, getting the mortgage insurance premium to be reduced, getting disaster recovery to be authorized year-round under the CDBG DR Reform Act, a variety of things that are near and dear to all of our hearts. And then we supported others like NEIA, the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act, Improvement Act. All those are were part of the mix. Christy and I were just talking to the NHC before this call. It does look like all our stuff went in, and it was kind of a warm reception. And hopefully this will help move things forward. And we'll continue to follow up on it with both our players and directly with the administration. We want to just keep people in mind on this private equity companies coming in and buying the housing stock that would normally go to affordable housing and first-time home buyers. And this whole crisis here, which is making it exceedingly difficult for first-time home buyers to find anything, and forcing many more people to be in rental situations. And this is an issue that's not turning around. And I think we've talked in the past, and we'll have a webinar coming up shortly about some things to do to curb private equity companies from doing what they're doing. But I'm actually going to just ask that you communicate with us about what you're seeing with private equity companies coming in. Are they which of the companies, what are they doing? Are we essentially seeing that they're outbidding everybody? How far off are the bids? Are there when they make them when they convert the properties that they're buying to rental, and are they good landlords? Are they doing are there problems with them? All the kinds of things that can be stories where we're lobbying on this directly, and it is that kind of nitty-gritty detail that's very helpful to know, and very helpful to know if you happen to be in Wyoming, which we had a meeting with a senator from Wyoming just this week. And I mean, whatever state you're in, we're very interested in elevating these stories to the House and Senate offices that are in there. So keep that in mind, and please send us what you're seeing in the field. And the last thing is, we posted on this, and I just wanted to make sure that's on people's radars. So we're in a tough rate environment, and it's likely that rates may still go up some more. And that's obviously also making it hard on affordability. One opportunity is that FHA, VA, and USDA loans are assumable. And you are assuming, I mean, you have to qualify for it, but you're assuming the loan as is. And my understanding is that it's the same rate, certainly the same rate. There's a little bit of pricing that people will have to come up with in terms of fees, but it's not like going after a regular first-time mortgage. And hopefully people have substantial equity in the property already. But it's assumable, and somebody can assume it from the people and get essentially a better rate. Oh yeah, and the term does not need to be extended out. You're really taking over the loan as is. So this is a tool to think about. So for some people trying to buy a house that's a VA or FHA or USDA, you may need to borrow some more money in a second position loan to pay off what else there was on the sale price and equity. But for some people, this is a tool that I think is under-recognized for family members to be able to take over family houses. And in that case, there's no reason that you can't just take over the loan if the family would like to gift the property over. I mean, gift isn't quite the right term here, but you get what I mean, is that they could assume the mortgage and continue living in there and the parent, and you can, and the family can sort out the dynamic there. But the point is that it's a way of getting much more reasonable rates and keeping a property in the communities that keep a community of ownership of the family that is doing it. So it's an important tool, and wanted to make sure that people are thinking about that as they're moving forward as a way of preserving wealth in our communities. With that, I'm going to switch off to Christy so she can talk to us about what's happening in the legislative world.
Hi, everyone, and thank you to all for joining us. A special thanks to everyone who voted last week, or earlier this month, but yeah, so seems like it was last week with the results coming in so slowly. Overall, the Senate was held by the Democrats, so that's good news. And then the House just flipped yesterday, so Republicans have control over that. Right now, Congress is operating under a continuing resolution until December 16th. Members of Congress returned back to town earlier this week after a 6-week recess while they were campaigning. So they are currently working on the new spending bill for this year. So they're taking their time on the top line spending levels. I'm hearing that they may even have a 1-week continuing resolution on December 16th, just to give members more time to negotiate. So Democrats are definitely eager to pass a bill on time this year, especially as the Congress will be divided next year. Senate Appropriations Chair Leader Leahy and Ranking Member Shelby will be retiring this year. So that gives them ample motivation to pass a bill on time before leaving. Senator Murray and Senator Collins are expected to take over the Senate Appropriations Committee in the next Congress. And in the House, David Price is retiring, and we are expecting that Representative Quigley from Illinois 5, north of Chicago, will be taking over as the next chair of the THUD subcommittee. So we are working on trying to set up a meeting with him. So please keep an eye out for an email from me if you'd like to join that meeting. That'd be wonderful. Congressional offices love to hear directly from housing counselors on the trends. And so as appropriations continues, we'll continue to meet with different offices. So I'll be inviting different housing counseling agencies to meetings with us. We're still going to advocate for $70 million in FY 2023. It would be significant because this program has been flatline funded for the past 2 cycles. So ideally, the budget would be passed this year, as opposed to past January, because once Republicans take over the House, they will want to increase defense spending and lower spending domestically, as well as for programs. So we are expecting some programs to be flatline funded if there is a long-term continuing resolution that leads into next year. So yeah, that is all happening in Congress, and I look forward to updating you next time, and I'll pass it on to the next speaker.
So Eric, I think you're still on mute.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Christy, for the legislative update. My name is Eric Moore, and I'm here to remind everyone about NHRC's free job board. This job board has about 50 jobs uploaded and about 32 resumes. So just to remind you all that you're able to post your open positions on this platform and also serve resumes from individuals across the country. And I'll pass it back over to Ellie. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric and Christy, for those updates. All right, so just a couple of quick updates from me. We want you to join our Leaders in Housing Counseling listserv if you aren't already on our listserv. That's the email system that we send out a lot of pertinent information for housing counseling, for the housing counseling industry, and it's also where you find out about these webinars. And speaking of webinars, a couple of upcoming webinars. Bruce mentioned this one that's coming up on December 1st. about curbing private equity using tax laws, protecting home ownership. And the link is there to register, and Christy will put the link in the chat box. And also on December 8th, we have a session on building a housing counseling career path part 2. So just about exactly a year ago, we had folks from Housing Action Illinois on with us to talk about what they were doing with a virtual training that folks who were not already in the housing counseling industry but might be interested in becoming a housing counselor could take a training in order to help them pass the certification exam. They've done, I think, 4 of those trainings now. One of the other things that they talked about last year was the fact that they did a lot of work with AmeriCorps and were expanding that work with AmeriCorps to really have a housing counseling corps. And they were able to work with AmeriCorps to get funding to allow housing counseling organizations in surrounding areas around the state of Illinois to apply to have an AmeriCorps volunteer who would be specifically coming because they were interested in becoming a housing counselor. And so the reason that we are having the career path part 2, because if you listened last year, you might have heard that they were thinking about expanding to the entire country. And so they have now gotten funding through AmeriCorps to offer this program to all housing counseling agencies around the country. So one of the things that we are going to be talking about on December 8th is the application and how to fill it out and suggestions for information that you need to put in there. So don't miss this one. And again, the link is there and Christy will put it into the chat box. So with that, let's get to the meat of our conversation today. So Native American housing, what you need to know. So I'd like to introduce Sayer Savage, who is a programs officer at Owista Corporation. Sayer began working in the CDFI industry in 2019 with a focus on Native American housing programs. She received her housing counselor certification in 2019 and is a certified Pathways homebuyer education provider. Sayer has supported many financial education programs, including one-on-one housing and financial counseling, homebuyer education and financial workshops, and VITA programs. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sayer.
Thank you so much, Ellie, and welcome everybody. As Ellie mentioned, my name is Sayer Savage. You can go to the next slide, Ellie. And I'm a programs officer for Owista Corporation. Owista is a Native CDFI intermediary. We provide both capital and technical assistance to Native CDFIs and Native organizations across the nation. I'm zooming in from Maine today, which is the ancestry land of the Penobscot Nation of the Wabanaki Confederacy. So in my role here at Owista, I primarily focus on Owista's Native HUD Housing Counseling Network, which currently includes 11 network partners providing housing counseling services to their tribal communities. The Native HUD Housing Counseling Network was first established in 2019 and just gained approval from HUD in the fall of 2021. We're continuing to build a solid foundation of tightly connected Native HUD housing counseling agencies, and our reach stretches all the way from Hawaii to Maine. Today, we're going to hear a little bit more from 2 of our network partners, Kevin and Jeannie, and I'd like to let them introduce themselves. So Kevin, if you'd like to join.
Hello, everyone. Hi, I'm Kevin Sheehan, and I run the home ownership program for the Native American Youth and Family Center, and I've been there since 2018. I've actually been in the industry since 2004 doing this work, and so really excited to still be here helping new homeowners. So we are actually on tribal land, which is actually very, very interesting for being in the city of Portland, Oregon. So historically, the Native American Youth and Family Center was an elementary school. But before that, it was actually belonged to the tribe that was located there, and the land was called Near Chucuco. And the tribes that lived there would use the land to fish on the Columbia River, which is right by where we're located in Portland. And so it's nice to kind of have that history with where we actively live and work. Yeah, so again, we provide a lot of services. We do foreclosure counseling, we do home buyer counseling as well as home buyer education. As well, we are a HUD approved housing counseling agency. We have been HUD approved since 2010. So yeah, just really looking in my work to help right some of the historical wrongs and see what we can do to help our folks be able to own homes in an urban environment.
Thank you so much, Kevin. And Jeannie, if you'd like to do an introduction.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sarah. My name is Jeannie Felix. I am the Director of Client Development with Wisconsin Native Loan Fund, which is a nonprofit Native CDFI located in Lac du Flambeau, which is on the Chippewa Reservation. So a little bit about Wisconsin Native Loan Fund. We serve all 11 tribes in Wisconsin, and we have recently opened up our lending opportunities to natives that may not be originally from Wisconsin, but they are now currently living and working in the state of Wisconsin. So we're trying to reach out as far as we can to as many people as we can. We provide a number of different loan opportunities, which would be home loans, which I would be personally preparing individuals to take on home ownership, repairing their credit with them, building them a structured budget and financial plan to absorb the cost of home ownership. As well as we offer debt consolidation loans, emergency funding, homeowner, or not only home ownership, but automobile loans. There's a variety of different things that we do offer to our clientele. The goal, my personal goal as the Director of Client Development, is to give all Native Americans opportunity and resources, which opens up and helps drop some of those stigmas associated with being a Native American living in America. So that is personally what I do, and what we do. I'm definitely not as we actually, WinLift developed, we were founded by Fern Ori, and she took us from being a very small Native CDFI, and we grew to now we just hired our 7th employee. We have a very small staff, but we work very hard. I am the primary, I do business as well, business development with Natives, hoping and helping them succeed on their own terms. A lot of times they're connecting back to their roots of what they were taught, whether it be fishing, whether it be ricing, whether it be, we currently have one that is looking to expand. She's got a wild rice business, and she's been running it for the past 11 years, and she wants to expand to include fur trading. So that's going to be a new and fun adventure. And she's coming to me to help set up her business and get her fundable, not only with Wisconsin Native Loan Fund, but for anybody in the future. So she could have opportunities to go to whatever, a normal bank, if she would like to go get a normal, if you want to say normal, a loan out of a bank. Otherwise, she could stay with CDFI or open up other opportunities. We do work with a lot of different groups to like bounce off as well. We use SCORE, which actually ladders up with mentors. So somebody who's been working in the industry that can help them build their businesses as well. It's a fantastic opportunity for them all. So that's what I've got. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out and contact us. So,
Thank you, Jeannie.
you're welcome.
So we'll do a little bit of some back and forth with Kevin and Jeannie throughout today's webinar. But before we get started, I'd like to give a little bit of context to the history and the complexity of homeownership on tribal land. So prior to European contact, Native individuals had their own system for recognizing and enforcing property rights to their territory and also to their resources. European colonization resulted in a devastating change to the way of life of tribal communities, which included land loss, disease, and the enforcement of laws that violated Native culture. The land loss specifically resulted in the ownership of land no longer residing with the tribal nations, but instead becoming federal government property. Through this process, original tribal land became held in trust either by the federal government or in common law by all members of the tribal nation. So both of these have caused numerous challenges to home ownership over the last 100 years, which we'll discuss a little bit more in our interviews with Jeannie and Kevin in a moment. There are approximately 5.2 American Indian and Alaska Native, making up approximately 2% of the entire US population. 60% of Native Americans live on or near reservation, with 55% being homeowners, but 75% of tribal households reporting a strong desire to owning a home. The Native communities often exist in what we call financial deserts, which are areas with inadequate access to traditional financial products, which limit access to home loans and to even basic bank accounts. So we'll go ahead and we'll start with some interviews here. Again, feel free to drop any questions in the Q&A and we'll get to those at the end. I'd like to invite Kevin and Jeannie back. Ellie, we can go to the next slide. Thank you, great. So we'll go ahead, we'll get started with Kevin, and then Jeannie, you can follow up. But can you talk a little bit about what tribal housing looks like in your community?
Yeah, so we're a lot different than most other tribal organizations. So for example, we sort of represent the urban Native population. A lot of our clients live in Portland, Oregon, or the suburbs around there. And so they're not dealing with a lot of the, tribal, land lingo and other terms that they're familiar with. And so we feel like we have to do a lot of education, especially for those natives that are coming from the reservation, because it's just such a different world as far as property ownership and property taxes and things like that. And I'll use that as an example. So one example with educating urban natives is that, so on reservations, there's no property taxes, right? Because it's considered typically sovereign. However, if you're purchasing a home, say in Portland, Oregon, or in one of its suburbs, you're going to have to pay property taxes, and that needs to be a part of your thinking when you're out there shopping for a home. So it's really important that we know the background that they're coming from, so that way we can make sure to educate them about the differences between, owning a home in an urban environment compared to, say, a tribal environment.
Great, thank you, Kevin. And Jeannie, what does tribal housing look like in your community?
Currently, so Wisconsin Native Loan Fund services tribes all across Wisconsin. So as long as you're in Wisconsin, we get to service you. So we deal with both on reservation and off reservation. We have different types of lands on the reservation. We have a lot of lands. We have pockets of fee land located in reservation land. So it's definitely a well-versed, like Kevin had mentioned, that's part of I too am certified in the Pathways Homebuyers Education class. So it's a wonderful curriculum because it does touch on both fee land and non-fee land. So that I see people wanting to come back to the reservation areas because there is no taxes associated with owning a home. There's also other benefits as well as, if they're going to build on the reservation, then they get a free well and septic, one per individual per their lifetime. So there are benefits to that also. When you go back to your reservation or reservation lands, some of the Wisconsin tribes offer a down payment assistance program to help you attain your home on a reservation. The only problem I do see a lot of individuals that are no longer on reservation and they want to purchase their home off reservation because there's more opportunity. There's very, very little opportunity on the reservations for homes right now. It's not only to purchase a home, but actually to rent a home as well. I'm seeing an influx in homelessness right now associated with individuals wanting to come back to the tribe and not their tribes and not actually having a place to go. So that seems to be the biggest challenge right now, is actually having the homes available. I know they touched on it on the private equity circa, actually purchasing up all these properties, even working with individuals that are off reservation. They're seeing the same thing. Their affordability isn't there, and it really does not come down to them being native. It just comes down to the jobs are not supporting the new economic norm of the housing market. So that seems to be the biggest challenge for the individuals that I'm helping now, is finding a home that's going to be affordable for them. So that's some of the stuff that I actually see and deal with.
Absolutely. And thank you, Jeannie. You kind of lended into the next question here, but I think nationwide, we're seeing challenges with affordability and availability right now. I think everybody has touched a little bit of that too. Could you talk about some of the challenges to becoming a homeowner that might be specific to the Native communities? Maybe a little bit on the Bureau of Indian Affairs or appraisers.
The BIA is always very, very difficult because they're so very slow. So a lot of lending institutions, like if you're not dealing with a Native CDFI, which there are a couple of them in the state of Wisconsin, but if you're not dealing with them and you're dealing with the USDA, you're dealing with HUD, you're dealing with those government programs, they're wanting to have that lease already okayed, has the BIA stamp, the TSR is done through the BIA, and we're not seeing that for up to a year. Very, very, very slow, very, very more times than not, we're actually closing out the loan already because there hasn't been any flags. But that seems to be the biggest challenge, is actually getting the BIA to cooperate and getting the individuals into the homes that they want to be in.
And in your community, Jeannie, what does your relationship with the Bureau of Indian Affairs look like?
What relationship? It's a very it's like you're there, but we don't have a whole lot of interaction with them because they are so slow of even responding to emails. They're very, very slow. They're a huge challenge in the housing industry.
So a lot of times when looking to purchase or to gain a leasehold to a property on reservation, you have to go through the Bureau of Indian Affairs to get what's called a title status report showing ownership of that specific property. And as Jeannie mentioned, it's a huge challenge nationwide because it can take months. I know in my experience, I've had some folks that we've been waiting 18 plus months to get a response from the BIA in order to move forward with that land lease. It's definitely a challenge.
Right. Currently, what we actually do to help move along the process is all of the tribes have a land management department. So we do rely heavily on the land management department and their record keeping. So that's how we function, and we get the people into the homes that they need to be in if they choose to come back to a reservation.
Great. Thank you. And Kevin, would you like to touch on some of the specific challenges to homeownership that you're experiencing?
Yeah, so what we see in the Native population in Portland, Oregon is the same that a lot of minority groups and also immigrants are facing as well. So, you've got wages, which are staying fairly steady. You might see a little bit of a rise, but compared to prices, which have just skyrocketed, it's really, really hard to be able to afford a home with the kind of incomes that you're seeing in our communities. And so we really spend a lot of time trying to, navigate resources, down payment assistance programs, home repair programs, other types of resources that we can utilize, because there's no other way to be able to get into a home, because unfortunately the housing prices here in Portland are just so high compared to incomes in the communities that we serve. You've also seen the drastic increase in interest rates. That's also cut into a lot of affordability. And so I feel like the biggest challenge right now is obviously resources, being able to afford to be able to, have the down payment and even get into the home, but also just combating, our clients, they see the news, right? They see what the housing prices are like. They see what interest rates are doing, and it's extremely demotivating. I hear constantly from our clients, they feel beaten up, that they feel that they'll never be successful, that everything is turned against them. And so one thing that we have to do is not only a lot of education, but also a lot of motivation as well. You know, how are we going to help those in the Native community to overcome those challenges of lesser affordability, of high housing prices and things like that? And so again, that's where a lot of our work revolves around, you know, looking at the resources, working with, you know, folks to educate them about, you know, what the housing market is like. And so, you know, those are challenges that quite honestly, a lot of groups are facing these days. And we're just doing the best we can to try and be able to help them as much as we will.
Sarah, we had a really good question in the comments. And if you don't mind, can I read it?
Sure, go for it.
All right, so Theodore had mentioned that, I believe it's Theodore's. Okay, so that with one of our rehab programs that we offer, there is a stipulation of our funders. I don't think that's the one that I was looking at. Sorry, it's actually Brianna Hitzels. Yeah, you're it is kind of confusing, Ellie. Okay, so prior to starting my role as a housing director with my new organization, I was the deputy director of DHS for a local tribal nations reservation. A huge housing issue I ran into was dealing with land in trust and no living will. Can you share any solutions you have found for that? So fortunately, I have not experienced that yet. However, when I do my educational pieces, I do encourage individuals to actually have not a living will, but to actually put their assets into a trust, because you can't actually fight a trust. It is what it is. I know there is issues that some family members have. They married a non-native and and had children. Non-native outlived them, and they built a home there with a family. So those are some of the issues that I actually see versus, you know, people not leaving their house, or they did leave their house and people fighting over it. But I don't have a real true solution for that, and I wish I did. And I'm more than open to learning more about that. Kevin, do you have any questions on that or any answers to that?
I don't, but you know, one thing that I would strongly recommend is you know, explore those resources. You know, talk to a lot of your local government, nonprofit, churches, other organizations as well. I sometimes find even resources that I had never heard about as well. So definitely encourage folks to do their own due diligence out there and you know, see what resources might be available to be able to help. But yeah, this is a tough situation.
Yeah. Also, 9 times out of 10, your tribe, the tribal lawyer, actually can formulate a will or trust for you as part of, I know Wisconsin, that's how it does work. I don't want to speak for the nation because I don't know everybody's rules, regulations, but in Wisconsin, a tribal lawyer for the tribe actually can develop those for you and help protect those assets. And
awesome. Thank you, Jeannie. And both of you have kind of touched a little bit about some of the resources that are available in your communities. Kevin, I know you mentioned down payment assistance. Kevin, do you mind kind of touching on where you go to find those resources, or how you identify those resources?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, a few resources out there. So one that I will share for those folks that are working with Native Americans in your own community is encourage them to talk to their tribes. A lot of tribes will have down payment assistance programs or other types of assistance programs. They differ amongst tribes. Some are grants, some are loans, some you can use on the reservation, some you can use anywhere. It just really depends on the tribe, but it's well worth a phone call and worth exploring. For a lot of those programs, you need to be an enrolled member of that tribe. But for those folks that are enrolled members, I strongly encourage them to talk to their tribes and see if there are any assistance programs that might be able to benefit them. Another one for folks that are on the West Coast is the Federal Home Loan Bank of Des Moines actually has a special down payment assistance programs for folks that are enrolled with a federal tribe, federally recognized tribe as well. So if you use one of their lenders that they oversee, there's a program that can actually step in to help out with $15,000 if you make under 80% of the AMI. So there are specific resources out there, not only just from tribes, but also specifically for Native Americans. In order to find those resources and explore them, again, I really strongly recommend that they talk to a HUD-approved housing counseling agency. Again, that's our job, to make sure that we know about these resources, that we can educate clients about them, walk them through that application process, and really be there to support them as they try and pursue these resources. Because as you see with the rising housing prices and rising interest rates, there's going to be more and more of a need for these resources. So they are out there, they do exist, and I strongly encourage those folks to either talk to their tribe or talk to a local HUD-approved housing counseling agency in order to find and explore those resources.
I will have to agree with Kevin, most definitely. What I do actually when I start working with a client, depending on where they're located, because some of them are not, like I had mentioned, are not on reservation. Ho-Chunk, for example, does not have actual boundaries. They have actually plots in the state of Wisconsin. So sometimes they're in different counties, and different counties actually offer down payment assistance. And it doesn't matter if you are specifically Native American or if you are not. Some tribes, as he had mentioned, do not have down payment assistance programs. Some do. Some are very restricted to just in the boundaries of the reservation or just in that county. Some are not. So definitely, I always try to keep up on things as well. It's always easier in the beginning of the year because that's usually when grants are renewed and refreshed. More opportunities are available in the beginning of the year. Towards the end of the year, it's kind of a challenge. It definitely is a challenge, and definitely use your HUD housing counselor. They're going to be the ones that guide you and lead you to where you can go. Your best solutions and opportunities, like right now, your native CDFIs, your local native CDFIs, they typically don't have like the same insurance premiums, mortgage insurance premiums like you would on FHA or USDA or anything like that. And they may be a little bit more lenient on your credit scores than should you have decided to go with a USDA loan, a HUD loan, a VA loan, or an FHA loan. So your HUD housing counselor is definitely going to be the one that's going to probably talk to you, discover, what your wants, needs, and desires are, what your capabilities are, and which program is actually going to be the best for you. Give you all the options of those opportunities and let you decide on which direction, and then walk you through, as Kevin said, walk you through the process and get you into your home.
Great. And Jeannie, maybe you can start here, but just to clarify, if a housing counselor doesn't have those resources readily available to them, where might you recommend that they go to get those resources and to find out what's available?
For me, I love Google. Google's fantastic. Otherwise, I do rely on our local housing authority. So I do keep in contact with them, and there's 11 of them. So I try to keep up on what's going on there because they always change. There's always different things, especially when they issue in new leadership roles, that stuff changes. So you always want to be aware of what's happening in your community. And that's what I do. I reach out to either the housing authority, or I literally look on Google to see what kind of opportunities are out there and available right now.
And just to clarify, Jeannie is referring to the tribal housing authority.
Yes.
So it's at the community level within the tribe.
Yes.
Great. And Jeannie, you started to talk about this a little bit, but can you talk some more about what type of loan products might be available on reservation versus off reservation?
So on reservation, you definitely have opportunities with the HUD with the 182. And then there is USDA actually has 2 programs as well that are specifically for Native Americans on tribal lands. Otherwise, your native CDFIs would be a good asset to have. Unfortunately, the banks tend to not want to lend on tribal lands because the land is not cannot be used as collateral. And it's very difficult for somebody to come in and purchase that home because they have to meet certain requirements, such as a tribal member to assume that lease on that property to be able to purchase that home. And very, very seldom to never, especially on chattel which is like a double wide or a single home, mobile home, it doesn't hold a value for one, and two, we're not going to go in and remove it from the lender's not going to go in there and remove it from the property. So that is why there was always a challenge with conventional lending through like banks that are not established on a reservation or not in contact with a reservation, or they just don't want to deal with it. It's too much of a headache. Also, foreclosure process is completely different when you're trying to foreclose on a home, which we really don't want that to happen, but foreclose for a home that's on reservation lands. If it's on trust land, it's very difficult. You have to go through, it's a different process. You have to go through the tribal courts instead of the county courts to actually have that individual held responsible for that debt that they incurred.
And that process
I
is going to
just-
look a little different depending on the tribe as well. I'm sorry, Bruce, you can go ahead.
Well, I just think it would be helpful to understand the land ownership and what its relationship is to somebody who's owning a house. And is that true for all reservations? Do you want to walk through that a little bit about what the nature of the trust is?
There's a couple different pieces of trust land. There's allotted lands, which actually can be used for collateral. And those are actually, if grandma and grandpa got it, it becomes fractured land. Grandma and grandpa got it, they had 3 children, it becomes fractured. So each individual that is attached to that lease, which would be the children as well, they could use that property as investment as long as the rest of the invested parties agree to it. And the BIA has to agree to it as well. So it just keeps going down as the family grows, it becomes more and more fractured. That's the allotted lands. Those are also subject to taxes, or can be fee lands as well. Some pockets in a reservation can be fee lands. Sometimes what happens is there was a foreclosure of some sort and the property was refused by the tribe. The tribe did not want to, because the tribe has first right to refusal in a foreclosure process. So if the tribe does not want to purchase that property, it then becomes the state property and becomes fee land inside of trust land. That would also be considered, if it gets turned back over to the tribe, if the tribe does purchase it back, then that would also become an allotted piece of land. That would stay, like, you would always have a fee attached to that, the taxes. So if it's a straight up trust land, there is no way for an individual that gives them a loan to take that. It can never be used as collateral. But fee land, which is something you pay taxes on, has no bearing. Anybody can have it, anybody can own it. It can be used as collateral, it could be resold, it could be taken if it was foreclosed on. There, I hope that's what you were looking for, Bruce. Is that?
Do you want to explain trust land a little bit? And then what the relationship is? There's a lease or how that works?
The trust land,
Yeah.
as in the trust land was given to the Native Americans and the BIA actually governs it. Homelands, yeah. Okay. I'm sorry, I was reading the chat. I probably shouldn't, but the trust is actually governed by the BIA. The BIA has the final say, and it changes like within each state. Whatever happens on trust land, which is actually for the individual Indians, the Native Americans, that is the US government owns the land. The BIA governs the land to say who gets it, who gets the lease. They document it, where it's been, where it's going, who's been there. I know you guys shared a link to say to see where if your lands were once Native American lands. So that's kind of, the BIA is kind of running that for you. They're the one that's going to have all that information. They are also the ones that are going to be saying Yes, you meet all rules and regulations. You are not, I believe you have to have certain things, like you cannot be a criminal to obtain a lease. You cannot be violent. You cannot have any offenses. You have to meet certain requirements to sign, to have a lease. And those leases are to each and every tribe. Thank you. Hot dog of code talk. Okay.
So the trust land can be allotted to individuals as well. It just needs to be allotted from the government versus from the tribe itself. And just to clarify, every tribe has land held in different land status. So if you're working with an individual who is looking to purchase on reservation, it's important to reach out and do your research or reach out to the tribe directly and find out what type of land that reservation, what type of status that reservation has land held in. And Jeannie, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good. You're good.
Kevin, is there
Definitely good.
anything you wanted to add in regards to land status in your community?
Yeah, so one of the things that we have to, obviously since, we're representing an urban community, we don't deal a lot with like, those sort of, tribal status of lands. But we do have to educate folks about things like, say, land trusts. So for example, a land trust is a very common way in Portland to be able to defray the cost of owning a home. And so we have to make sure that we're educating our folks about what we're doing in the urban areas, because, they may not have that back where they're coming from or in their community. And so they need to know about all the options that are available. And so, again, we don't deal so much with all the tribal aspects, but there's also just a lot of other types of home ownership, co-op, et cetera. And so we find that we have to educate our community members about those.
Awesome. And Jeannie, you kind of touched on this, but Kevin, what type of loan products are available in your area?
Yeah, so a lot of our community will look at the HUD 184 because they're very interested in the low down payment requirement. Obviously, with our housing prices, down payments can get quite high, and so that's a major concern for them. So a lot of our folks do look at HUD 184. For folks outside of the Portland area, looking at rural areas, we look at a lot of USDA. So that's actually fairly common for those folks that are looking to move outside the city. For those folks that are not going through 184, typically they'll go conventional. They'll look at conventional loans. But again, the biggest problem that I'm seeing right now is the savings. It's like coming up with that down payment. And so that's really the biggest issue that we're finding. Our folks are able to repair their credit. They're making typically decent income, but it's hard to be able to get all that money together for a down payment, closing costs, et cetera, when we're in such a competitive and high priced housing market.
Can you explain 184 a little bit?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So HUD 184 is a loan specific for those folks that are enrolled with a federally recognized tribe. So you do have to be enrolled. Some of the benefits of 184, it's a lot like an FHA loan. It's a governmental loan. The benefits of 184 is it has a lower down payment requirement. So it only requires 2.25%. It also has a low credit score requirement. It can go as low as 610. And so those are two of the major benefits for those folks that have enrolled tribal status and are looking to either save money on the down payment or just don't have the credit score to be able to get into a conventional mortgage.
Good job, Kevin. I think we should actually, I think we should probably answer some of the questions that come up on the question and answers.
No, you can wait.
have-
You can wait until the end, please.
Oh, okay.
I'll take this opportunity to remind everybody that if you're putting questions in the chat box, please enter them into the Q&A so that I don't lose track of them. I don't want to miss your questions. They're always really wonderful. Thanks.
Thank you, Ellie. And yeah, we'll have time for Q&A once we're finished with questions, but just to kind of touch on that 184 loan again, there are certain restrictions based on states and tribal communities. There are lists of HUD 184 vendors that are available on Code Talk, which is the same link that Christy put in the chat earlier. And there are different HUD 184 lenders across the nation. Some native CDFIs also offer the HUD 184 loan, and sometimes it's a more traditional banking institution, or maybe even a national bank that can provide the HUD 184 loan in your area. So I'm just gonna head to the next question here. When providing housing counseling and or financial workshops to tribal members, how do you work to stay culturally relevant? And how do you work to make sure that on-reservation housing is also included in your training and in your conversations? And maybe Kevin, if you want to start.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So, yeah, one of the things that I found when working with the Native American community is that they're very story-based. And so for us in our education, what we try and do is we try and make it very relatable, but we also try and use a lot of stories. We find that actually works fairly effectively. Like when we're trying to explain very complicated, very intense topics, to use stories, because not only can you be able to explain it a bit better, but you can also make it very relatable. For a lot of our community, they feel that they, will never be able to own a home, that they'll never be successful. And so we use, former clients and success stories and things like that to show that, hey, actually, you know what, if they can do it, then you can do it too. And so those are some things that we've been able to bring in from the cultural aspect into our education that we found is actually fairly effective when we're trying to get those concepts across.
I have to agree with Kevin. Definitely bring personal experience into the playing field. Let them know that they're not alone, that more than just them are facing what they're going through now. I also like to, up in northern Wisconsin, we like to fish. So I always use analogies, things like when I'm giving the difference between gross and net income, I'll let them know, hey, gross is like how many fish are in the lake, and net is how many you actually put in the boat, how many you are actually taking home. And they understand that. They can relate to that. They're like, oh, I got it. Because you can't. And it was wonderful because I had the opportunity of meeting a fella from Hawaii, and they have the same concept as well, and there's a very give and take community. They're very give and take individuals. So they understood that I'm going to take this home, and they also understand that, we have to save this because we're going to use it in the future, and we're going to restock it so we have it again. So they understand that. So I'm definitely with Kevin on that, utilizing actuality or examples of another individual that you worked with from their community, or they'd be like, oh yeah, I know who that is, or without telling them, but this is the situation they were in, and they're like, oh yeah, they told me. Native American communities are very verbal and vocal, so they talk to each other all the time. So I always encourage the conversation, and they make it more like a conversation, not a lecture. So they don't want to be lectured to, they want to learn. So I give them the tools so they can. And visual, I always give them visual things too. So they can watch the changes in their credit scores. They can watch their changes in their budgets. They can watch a lot of things. So I just give them the tools so they can do those things, and they can feel accomplished and move forward. So that's a lot of things that I utilize as well, in addition to what Kevin has to say.
Is there any specific curriculum that you guys tend to use for financial education or home buyer education, or for even the one-on-one counseling?
I use a mixture, but I definitely use Pathways for the home buyers education. There's a great curriculum. It's actually HUD certified as well. So that is what I prefer to use, as the Pathways. As far as the actual one-on-one counseling, I use a variety of things. I love the CFPB. They have a lot of great things, and I can actually refer them over to their website. That's what I do. That's what I use a lot of times.
Kevin, do you have any specific curriculums that you guys use?
Yeah, we also use Pathways Home as well. You know, we really liked it. We felt that it was culturally specific to the group that we were working with. They also had a lot of examples and activities that we thought were very valuable. So yes, we also utilize Pathways Home as well.
And Pathways Home is a specific homeownership curriculum created by the Native American Indian Housing Council. I think they started back in, I'm not sure when they started, but they host the week-long training to become a trainer. And it's a home buyer education curriculum that uses very specific examples as they relate to the Native communities. I think Pathways Home is used pretty much nationwide with Native CDFIs or Native housing agencies who provide home buyer education, but anybody can get certified in the Pathways Home curriculum. And I have one more question for you all, and then we'll open up for Q&A. How do you stay connected to your tribal communities? Like, what do your marketing and outreach efforts look like within your organization and program? And Kevin, maybe you can start.
Yeah, we do lots of outreach. We'll do, you know, being in an urban area, there's actually a lot of Native American events, like, you know, powwows or other events going on. And so we'll typically set up tables there so that way we can connect directly with our community. We also, lots of partnerships. You know, the Native community is, you know, just like she had said, is very, very word of mouth. And so, you know, you really need to, you know, develop those relationships that when people are talking about homeownership, that your name is being brought up into that conversation. So lots of partnerships with both other Native organizations, as well as other organizations around the city. You know, making sure that you're tabling at tribal events and being available for questions and being resourceful. And then also the other thing too is, so NADA offers a lot of other services besides just housing counseling. And so we partner with a lot of the internal services within NADA. You know, maybe they're giving a presentation on, you know, maybe children, but, you know, there's nothing wrong that says that we can't show up and also talk about homeownership, because I'm pretty sure that those parents not only care about their kids, but also eventually want to own a home one day. So quite honestly, with the outreach, you just have to take a lot of different tracks. You can't just stick with one thing and expect it to work. But we find that by utilizing a variety of sources, we find that we've been successful.
Great, thank you, Kevin.
So Wisconsin Native Loan Fund does, we do a variety of different things. We'll do in-person classes, financial literacy classes, as well as going into and attending. If there's like a conference, we go into the conference and we offer our services. We get invited into a lot of housing fairs. So we do go there. It's a wonderful opportunity to touch people, reach people. I'll sit down at those fairs and actually run people's credits with them. And we'll start talking about some of the things that they need to start working on or looking at or considering. And then they tell their friends. If they're happy with their results, they'll tell their friends, and then their friends tell their friends. And then I have people actually reaching out to me saying, I heard from one of my clients that I need to talk to you. So that's really how a lot of our networking is by word of mouth. And that's how I am very familiar that is very, very important to the Native communities, is word of mouth. So.
Great, yeah, definitely word of mouth is something that we always use pretty heavily as well. So Ellie, I think we're ready to open up with the Q&A. Do you want to read those questions out? Does that work?
Yep. I'll review those. So the very first question, this is a really interesting question, and I'd like to hear this as well. So could you please define the difference between tribal housing and on-reservation housing?
I don't think there's much of a difference. Tribal housing is really going to be on reservation housing, so it's going to be on tribal land, and it's going to be run by the tribal housing authority usually. that's my experience. Jeannie, I don't know, and Kevin, I don't know if there's other examples of that nationwide.
I think maybe I would like I would have a follow-up question to that question, and maybe they could explain a little bit more, because that's the same. Tribal housing is usually entities that are set aside for individuals that are homeless, low income. Where on reservation housing, are you speaking of the individuals that actually have houses on the reservation?
So this person may, put some clarifying information into the Q&A box, but I think that it was a result of just your conversations and the terms being used. And so there was just a question about what's the difference? So it sounds like there isn't a difference. It's just a choice of terms.
Yeah,
Sure.
there really isn't a difference. It's just tribal housing is usually individuals for lower income and
Just
home
to,
base.
it's also probably going to vary a little bit depending on the community and what language they use in their community in regards to tribal housing and on-reservation housing. Another difference might be tribal housing might be more rental units, where on-reservation housing might be more home ownership, but it's really going to vary. It's likely going to vary a little bit within different tribal communities. And I actually want to stress that a little bit. Tribal home ownership has kind of, it has unique challenges, but it does require a lot of research by the housing counselor. There's just so much variance. There's no real one and done kind of way to do anything across the nation. Each community is going to kind of do things slightly different depending on the governmental structure of their communities and what their community has for housing options.
Okay, thanks. Are there limitations to building on reservations?
Again, it's going to depend a little bit on the reservation, but generally speaking, no. And Kevin, the 184 loan sometimes has limits to how much they can lend. I don't know if you have those right off the top of your head by any chance. I think it's 300.
I don't, and the reason for that is we haven't run up against those limits in Oregon. It just hasn't been an issue for us because the limits are fairly high out here, so it just hasn't been an issue where I'm located.
I haven't run into any restrictions on building on reservation either.
The only restriction that I could even imagine would be like if you chose the USDA. It all depends on square footage of the house. Also, the BIA will come in and actually do an assessment on the property to make sure that there's environmental safety. And there's not going to be any damages to the environment for building in there in that specific place. But otherwise, there's no restrictions to building or what you build on the reservation. In Wisconsin.
I'm sorry, what was the last thing that you said? Because I spoke over you.
In Wisconsin, it's okay. I can only speak for Wisconsin.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay, well, speaking of BIA, so there's a couple of questions about the BIA in the Q&A box. I think that a few people were as dismayed as I was when I heard you say that it can take up to a year. And so it makes me wonder, those environmental reviews, do they take that long as well?
In my experience, no. In my experience, the environmental reviews were done by the tribe. And so they were usually pretty quick.
Okay.
But I'm speaking from Maine. So again, that's different. And Jeannie, I know you kind of shook your head. Have you had experience with that?
Well, the tribes do try to come in through their land management. They do, or they will hire somebody, but it still has to be approved by the BIA, which can be kind of timely. But as far as that holding up the process for us, no, that has not been the issue. The issue basically comes down to the lease the leases. When the
Okay.
tenants reports, yeah.
All right, so somebody wanted to, I'm gonna ask all of the BIA questions so that you can answer them, all at once. But somebody wanted to know if there was any option for suing the BIA, for how long it takes. And somebody wanted to know if there was wondered, are there delays due to being understaffed, or are lengthy investigations a factor in the case? And then somebody else just kind of commented, I imagine the availability of low interest loans is diminished as people wait for the BIA to respond. So there's
The
3 different
comment-
questions there.
And the comments are real, yes, because I mean, a lot of, we're all 3 of us are coming from the native CDFI industry, right? So there's usually a little bit of wiggle room and autonomy on the organization to hold or not hold those interest rates, especially if it's just waiting on the BIA.
Typically, just
ahead,
to like
Katie.
bounce off of Sarah a little bit, typically if you have already done your pre-approval or you've been approved for your loan, there will be no change into your loan. As far as the availability of low interest loans, no, that's pretty much being governed by, the federal average of what's going on. That's how HUD and USDA, they govern what interest rate you have, and that's by the national average. So if you work with a native CDFI, they're more able. Wow, they are able to be more flexible, and that they can drive right down to what your credit score is and how hard you've been working towards it. That all goes into account. We take that into account when a loan comes through a native CDFI. So, but otherwise, the other ones that's a no.
So
No,
no ability to sue.
you cannot sue them.
No ability.
Unfortunately, we would love to be like put a hot coal in their britches, but we can't. There's nothing we can do. We can just merely sit there, and we really have no rhyme or reason why it takes them so long. It just.
And this has been spanning years back. This
Mhm.
isn't a new challenge with the BIA. This is pre-COVID. This is this is a long time. At one point, my understanding was that they were just really, really backed up. Though in my experience, I'm not sure. But yeah, the BIA challenges are very, and those are very consistent, nationwide. They're not certain segments of the nation or specific tribes that have challenges. They also cover a lot, like I know for, Maine, it's most of the eastern states are covered by one BIA office. And there's just, I don't know how many people are working in that office, but I imagine that can be a lot to manage too. But
So kind of chronically understaffed. Not just as not just a recent thing, just kind of chronically not enough people.
it could be.
Okay, all right. Okay, so with one of our rehab programs that we offer, there's a stipulation by our funders that requires homeowners to own the land that the property is located on. And I think you touched on this a little bit, Jeannie. But this has caused a barrier with us being able to help the Native community on the rehab side because the tribe owns the land that the properties are located on. Do you know of any other resources or options out there that we might be able to refer these individuals to, or ways that we can get around this issue?
HUD has a rehabilitation loan. So does the USDA. You can contact your local Habitat for Humanity. That is where you use sweat equity. And they guarantee a loan, and they are starting to branch out onto reservation lands because they know there's a need there. So there are lots and lots of opportunities out there. And these
are so this question is specifically about rehab, not, so this is somebody who already owns the home?
Yep. Yep.
Okay,
Yep, absolutely. HUD 182 or the 184 loan is for, it's down only for purchase, could be a purchase and rehab. It could be a rehab, as long as they are the first ones on that loan, the primary holder to that interest. So, and as well as the USDA has two loans specifically for Native Americans, and yes, they do rehab loans, rehabilitation of a home.
I might also recommend reaching out to a local Native CDFI again. They might have rehab loans. They have special agreements with the tribes that allow certain MOAs or MOUs that allow them to gain ownership over land in the event of a foreclosure. And the 184 loan is on and off reservation. It's tribal members both on and off reservation. So that's not just on reservation loan. And like Jeannie said, it's for both purchase and rehab. So there are rehab funds available through the 184 as well.
okay. I'm sorry, I'm looking down because I'm seeing, I can't go to it on my computer, but there is actually a link for, it's cdfifund.gov. This is a Community Development Financial Institutions Fund, and they have Native initiatives there. So you're mentioning Native CDFIs as a resource here. So that is a place to go to look for that.
Yep.
And if anybody at Christie or anybody can Google, because I can't leave my screen, if anybody could Google the cdfifund.gov and find the Native Initiatives link.
Yep, it's in the chat.
Oh, you got it in the chat. Oh my God.
Christy did.
See that? That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. There's a question about the Pathways program. So do the graduates also need to be HUD certified?
No.
It is not a requirement, no.
Okay. Alrighty. With outreach, what are the best ways to build that initial trust with tribal communities?
Let Kevin answer this one.
Sure. I think again, that's where the word of mouth really helps. Because, you know, again, there's a natural suspicion because of the history in the Native American community. But if you're being recommended by someone's like fellow friend or tribal member, that actually does a lot to really help kind of like ease some of that suspicion. So, you know, I think being transparent, being upfront about what we're doing and why we're doing it and why it's important, I think is incredibly important. I think being able to show the success stories from other members of the Native community helps also build trust as well. And so you just really have to find a lot of ways to sort of like be able to wade through that suspicion. You know, again, you know, you're seen as sort of coming from the government. You're seen as sort of coming from finance, you know, and obviously those are not fairly, you know, trustworthy entities in their opinion. And so you have to build that trust, and you do that through, you know, just doing good work, by being transparent, and by, you know, endearing yourself to that community, so that way you're getting those referrals.
Thank you, Kevin. I also just like by being there, I know Kevin mentioned events, and Jeannie, I think you did too, but being at those events, like being seen and you know, shaking hands and cultivating those relationships really organically in person and presently, I think is really important too. Jeannie?
I agree, most definitely. When individuals are working with you and they have great success, they want to share that with their siblings, their family, their friends. They want to share that because they want, you know, they want them to be successful as well. And that is part of the Native culture is, if I'm going to be successful, I want my family to be successful too. They want to share that. If my family is down, I want to share that too. So they share the highs and lows no matter what. And definitely being seen is very, very important. Like they can talk about you, but unless you actually can see that person, they're just a talk. That's just a story. But if you can put concrete they're real, they're flesh and blood, they can help you too. If you can bring that reality to them, they like that too. So definitely go to the events, make yourself present, immerse yourself into your surroundings, be aware of their culture, be aware of, what is a problem, a challenge for them, what is a victory for them. Be a part of the victory, and definitely that's how you become very impactful.
Great. That's really helpful. So there's just one last thing. You did answer the question about where the 184 loans are available, but the person followed up and said, it's interesting because the loan limit chart does not have all the states listed. Is any comments about that?
Yeah, it's going to vary. It varies by state, it varies by tribe. The 184 isn't available nationwide. It's available in certain areas, in certain states, and in certain tribal lands. I haven't looked at that chart in a bit, I'll be honest, but I imagine if it's not showing a loan limit, it's not available.
Okay. Oh, did a new question just pop in? Yes. Yeah. Oh, so this person just says some of the eastern states are ineligible, including Pennsylvania, which I'm sure Bruce is unhappy to hear that. And with that, that is the last question, and I am going to hand it back over to Bruce to wrap it up. Thank you all so much. This was really informative and helpful. Bruce.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Ellie, and terrific, fascinating presentation, and it will be recorded and be available on our YouTube channel. Thanks, everybody, for doing this. Just a quick reminder, be sure to join NHRC. Get in 2022 still. We have the discount for the credit reports, pretty substantial. We also have a discount on the Savvy online loan service. And we do send out notices on unusual funding opportunities, occasionally media opportunities, and different things that we just send out to the membership. But the real thing to do this is you're supporting our work. And so we are promoting housing counseling in HUD, at Treasury, and CFPB, at the White House. We're doing a lot with lenders and servicers. We're doing a lot with institutional players in the marketplace. And we want to continue doing it. We need to grow a little bit. The Jobs Board is a good example of a project we can do that really we don't have any funding for it, but felt like it was a real need. And I will remind people, certainly if you have talk to your HR department if you have one, or if you're running the ads, make sure to use it routinely. It's free to you, and the more people use it, the more it'll start attracting attention. And Eric's working hard on promoting that. But we're going to keep all our work going. So thanks for all the good work you're doing out in the field. Certainly have a great Thanksgiving Day or Tofurkey Day, and hopefully you will get the chance to have a little bit of downtime as well. And we'll be back after the holidays for plenty more to do. Thanks, everybody.